Here.
Here. Here.
Okay, thank you. If everyone would check and make sure their cell phones are turned off for the meeting. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the September 17th, 2013 meeting. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to accept.
Mr. Lopez, thank you.
I'll second.
Mr. Pollock?
Can we, the end of the minutes, we never opened a work session and closed it. Read the end.
Are you talking about at the end of the minutes?
Yes.
Oh, that's right. So are you making a motion to amend the minutes to make that correction?
Well, I would like to amend the minutes to make that correction, yes. Amend the motion.
Okay.
What are we going to say? We have in there that we've actually,
At the top of page 2, it says that we adjourned the regular meeting and then the work session meeting was called to order. And we never called the work session to order. We just announced that it was postponed. Okay, so we have before us the motion to amend, the motion to approve the minutes, to delete the reference to the work session. Is there any discussion on the motion to amend?
No.
I'm sorry, first, we don't have a second yet on the motion to amend. Thank you, Ms. Hughes. Okay. Is there any discussion on the motion to amend the motion? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so the motion before us now is the amended motion to approve the minutes of the September 17th meeting with the deletion of the work session reference. Is there any discussion on that? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, the next item on the agenda is public comment. If there's anyone here wishing to speak to the board about an item not on tonight's, I'm sorry, let me back up a minute. The only item on our agenda tonight is a public meeting item, so there is no public hearing on that item. So if somebody's here wishing to speak to us on that item or anything else. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Next item is deviation request for 1013 Sugarberry Trail. Is the applicant present? Can you come to the podium, please? State your name and address for the record.
Philip Prigge, 1013 Sugarberry Trail, Oviedo, Florida.
And you are?
My name is Adam Koyman. I live at 784 South Lake Claire Circle, Oviedo.
Thank you. Now, sir, this is your opportunity to tell us about your project and why we should approve your request.
Okay, we're planning to build a pool in our backyard, and our backyard is fairly narrow, or shallow, let's just say. And so what we would like to do is build 5 feet from our property line. And when we do this, we'll put in a new fence around the property, which it's in need of. And we're asking for a deviation. I understand the backstop is 7 feet, and we're asking for a deviation to go 2 feet into the backstop and build 5 feet from the property line. So the enclosure will be 5 feet from the property line, and the pool itself, the water, will be 7 feet from the property line. And then to go along with that deviation into the backstop, we're asking for a deviation for the height of the enclosure to be 12 feet. I guess the standard height is 14 feet, but since we're going into the backstop, we have to reduce the heights. We're reducing it some, but not enough to meet the current code requirements. So we're asking for that deviation also.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions of the applicant?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Wright?
I just want to clarify, the exhibit that we were handed tonight, I think reflects the new request. What did you say the dimension was from the edge of the water to the?
It's actually 7.5.
Okay.
I didn't want to interrupt.
No, that's fine. You said 7, I just want to make sure that we were clear on that. This is their only opportunity to look, right? Knowing that we've just received a amended request tonight, in the original order, there was conditions of approval based on the original request. And it said the applicant was going to install 2 canopy trees on the south side of the property and 2 medium trees on the north side for screen enclosure. But now that's been reduced now, so you've increased the deviation but asked for less mitigation. Was there, explain why, what you're looking for on it?
Yeah, they're on the one side of the property, the narrow side of the property, which is the straight edge side. We only have about 7.5 feet, I think it is. I don't have the current plans, but I believe there's about 7.5 feet. Yeah. And on the other side, we're building an area that's going to have pavers on it that will not be under the enclosure, so that reduces the width of the available land to do that. And the intent is actually to get as much sunlight back there to the pool area as possible. So, and since we're putting a new fence in where the existing fence is, we're hoping that will mitigate any any visual contact with the backyard area, along with 2 medium-sized trees. But to put canopy trees in that small size area, I'm just afraid I'd be dumping leaves in my neighbor's yard.
What kind of trees are you planning on putting up?
That's my better half. I'll let her take a look at it. But we were looking at something like a maybe citrus trees, or just a I don't. Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that, to tell you the truth. She's my better half's more the plant person, the tree person. So
You're not leaning, obviously, towards like queen palms or anything, like just a stick in the ground at that point. Then you're looking for
a medium-sized tree. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions?
Thank you. Anyone else have questions of the applicant?
Do you,
I'm just curious as to what what changed the plans? Why are we going from the 5.5 to a 5-foot deviance?
Yep. Well, I'd asked for the 2-foot. Maybe there was some misunderstanding between Adam and I from the beginning. And so when I saw this last week before we went before the Land Development Committee, I called him and notified him that, this was not my intent. And there was just some misunderstanding, I think.
And I'm sorry, what I'd like to expand on that, ma'am, is Mr. Prigi had done the math on the deviation, and we were still under the 30%. It's now at 28.6, so it felt like it was still well within our rights to go to that area, to go into that deviation. Not to mention that we also had found out that the 7-foot rule is not how it's always been in that neighborhood. It used to be 5 feet, so there's a lot of folks, neighbors of his, that have been allowed to go within 5 feet, and his actually neighbor directly behind him is exactly 5 feet off the property line. So when we first initially designed the project, we went to that 5-foot mark, then found out we had to go back, and then with the math and everything, I went to 1.5, where technically I should have gone to 2. So that falls on my shoulders. Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions of the applicant? Mr. Pollack?
do you already have 3 shade trees on your property in the front yard?
Yeah. Well, we have a Drake elm, which is it almost covers the entire front yard. We have a bird of paradise, which is a tall of the is the peak of the house. I don't want it to get taller than the peak of the house, but it's, and really I have two shade trees, I guess. I would term those two relatively large, tall trees that are as tall as the peak of the house.
If you don't mind, sir, make one comment. When you look at the aerial photo in the DRC meeting that we were in last Thursday, his neighbor to the north has a really big tree that's actually throwing a lot of shade on his property already. And that, when Mr. Priege requested to go from 4 trees to 2, one of the members of the board pointed that out and said, you know, at my home, I personally have some trees that kind of surround my pool, and it really reduces the amount of sunlight that I get, and it keeps my pool water cool. So his personal experience, he said, listen, this tree that's over here already is casting quite a shadow. And there actually was another individual on the board as well who also seconded that and said, listen, I have the same situation at my house, and when you plant a lot of shade trees, it just really, you know, if you're trying to mitigate the view of the screen from these other folks' homes as part of this situation, they already have trees, and they already have screens, and they already have pools. So that kind of, they felt like that reduced the impact of, the negative impact of the view of the screen on those folks was going to be minimized, even with 2 trees, and still not take away the sunlight and the availability of, you know, a leisure area outside of his screen enclosure. So that was the point. It was actually like all 4 of us together were kind of chit-chatting about it, and that's how that point was made.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of the applicant?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Wright?
more of a comment. This is, I apologize, your name? Adam.
Yes, sir, my name's Adam.
You said a couple things that just kind of struck me. You, as an applicant, you can make a request. There's no rights given to you to,
Sorry about that.
provided, you know, you have the
Yes,
right
sir.
to request it. But, and the purpose of the way I look at this is the purpose of these, the mitigative techniques is specifically, you're asking for a deviation that has to be approved. And those mitigative techniques are specifically to screen the deviation, in this case, the additional encroachment into the property. And the final thing is, and it's been stated very clearly in here, I noticed in your original letter too, the fact that there's other houses in there that have shorter distances have no bearing, you know, as far as we're concerned at this point. So I just was more of a comment to make sure that we're clear on, you know, how we look at it or how I'm looking at it. So
I appreciate that. Thank you, sir.
Anything else for the applicant? I have one for you. In your memo, Mr. Coyman,
Yes, ma'am.
to staff dated June 4th, it's attachment 4 in our packet. Paragraph 5, you said that we were considering going into the setback further, but this distance will serve the purpose required. So if on June 4th, the shorter deviation was going to work just fine, I'm not sure I understand why now it's not.
Right. That's purely if, and I'll tell you exactly why. Mr. Priege's backyard is such to the fact that if we don't gain that extra 6 inches, you're actually reducing the amount of space he has as he walks out of his sliding glass door and stepping out onto the pool deck. It becomes very tight right there. Plus, he has no other way to gain a shading area since there's no built-in lanai cover. We're going to add what's called an elite roof scenario. If you're familiar with that, it's a type of screening enclosure where you add an aluminum roof structure to give him some shade back there and an area to entertain folks. And once we decided to get that extra 6 inches, then that was giving me enough room to design the roof structure into that part of the pool deck area. So that was the main thrust of why that, you know, we extended it to 6 inches.
Okay, but the way you had designed it in June, before June 4th, the original request was fine. Okay.
Well, you know, do you want to speak to that, sir?
It was fine for his interpretation, but for the interpretation when I was one as a client of his, it was not what I'd asked for. I was looking to be able to set up a table with 4 chairs and to be able to have coffee in the morning and things like that. So kind of, when I measured out how much room that I needed, it was just barely enough going 2 foot in there, and that's when I saw the 1.5 foot in his letter in the package that was provided to the Land Development Committee last week. That's when I brought it to his attention. That's not what I had asked for.
Okay, one question I have is how much distance is there from the rear wall of the home to the edge of the pool? I don't see that on the drawings.
I have that measurement right here. From the sliding glass door to the edge of the pool is 6 foot 9 inches.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have anything of applicant? Thank you. You may sit down. Maybe you're from staff?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I'd like to make this presentation the first part based on the original report, and then I would communicate what was the DRC's recommendation. This is a request for the Planning, Zoning, and Appeals Board to approve the deviations as listed below. A 1.5 foot, 21.5% deviation to the required 7 foot minimum rear setback requirement of LDC section 4.15B6, accessory pool patio and screen enclosure requirements, to allow the construction of a pool patio decking and screen enclosure with a minimum setback of 5.5 feet. And a 1 foot, 9% deviation to the maximum height requirement of LDC section 4.15B3, accessory pool patio and screen enclosure requirements, to allow the construction of a screen enclosure with a maximum height of 12 feet with a minimum rear setback of 5.5 feet. Let me explain the second deviation. Since the applicant is requesting to reduce the setback, we found that the minimum, actually the maximum height of 14 feet should also be reduced in tandem with the amount of, proportionate to the amount of feet that they are reducing the setback. So instead of making a proportion for having a setback of 5.5, the height should be 11 feet, the maximum height. So at that time, he was asking for 12 feet. It was a 9% deviation. So if we approve the deviation for the setback, we felt that the height should be also reduced. Okay. The subject property is located at 1013 Sugarberry Trail in the LFA Woods subdivision. So you have a location map and an aerial map that locate the house in attachments 1 and 2, where you can see the house in relation to the other properties and what they have in terms of vegetation and the existence or not of screen enclosures and pools. The property has a future land use designation of planned unit development and is located in a planned unit development zoning district. This PUD zoning district is governed by an amended and restated zoning classification agreement, which was approved through ordinance number 1244, adopted on May 19, 2003. Residential accessory structures are not covered in ordinance number 1244. Therefore, the current land development code is applied for the deviation requests. Staff reviewed the application and the information presented by the applicant pursuant to the criteria set forth in LDC section 2.6C of the 2006 Land Development Code. These criteria are outlined in your report. There are 8 criteria. We looked at those criteria according to the original request. One of them is that only the minimum deviation is granted. That was what was the desire of the applicant. And also there is another another criterion, which is the proper use of mitigative techniques, which I'd like also to comment on that later. When we sent the staff report, we didn't have the DRC recommendation, and what you have in front of you is a complement to our staff report where we describe what the applicant has already requested. At the DRC meeting, the applicant requested to consider greater deviation both for the setback and for the height. So the new request, and I will now read what would be the deviations according to the new request, will be a 2-foot deviation, which is a 28.6% deviation to the required 7-foot minimum rear setback requirement of LDC section 4.15B6 to allow the construction of a pool patio decking and screening enclosure with a minimum setback of 5 feet instead of 5.5. The other deviation is to request a 2-foot, a 20% deviation to the maximum height requirement of LDC section 4.15B3, accessory pool patio and screening enclosure requirements to allow the construction of a screening enclosure with a maximum height of 12 feet in relation to a minimum rear setback of 5 feet. In this sense, when you do the proportion, your maximum height should be 10 instead of 11. So there is an increase in the deviation request despite not having an increase in the actual 12 feet in height. The DRC considered the new deviation request and recommended approval 4-1 with the following condition. The applicant shall install 2 medium trees on the rear of the house, one on the north side and one on the south side of the pool screen enclosure to further mitigate the visual impact of the proposed pool screen enclosure. The plant material must be maintained by the owner. There was a discussion during the DRC meeting regarding the insulation of the pool, and the DRC proposed this recommendation instead of canopy trees to have medium trees. Staff cannot support the applicant's new request for the following reason. The reason is that the applicant has provided written documentation in the beginning that the original request was the minimum deviation necessary, and that is one of the criteria for us as staff to recommend or not recommend approval. So this is our recommendation, and the PZA has options which are described in your report, and I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions of staff?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Pollard?
how many, in Alafaya Woods, how many deviations like this? Do you know how many deviations they've had like this in Alafaya Woods?
I don't have that now exactly in LFA Woods. Actually, in the next presentation, you have a percentage of the types of deviations that we have been issuing since 2006, which is this code.
Okay.
I don't have that, but I can tell you that Alafaya Woods is an older neighborhood, and most likely many pools have been built according to the 2000 code, which allowed a 5-foot setback. So I don't know whether the neighbors were at that time, because we don't have that information.
Okay. And per code, isn't it 3 shade trees on the on each property? Isn't that what it is for residential properties in Oviedo?
For today's code, yes.
Okay.
Any other questions of staff?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Wright?
so I'm clear, in the report, you've given us about 7 options for how we can make a decision. One of the things is approve the deviation as recommended by staff, the third one. So in this case, you're not supporting the current amended request.
Yes.
Staff is supporting the original
The original
request
one.
with the 4 trees, the 2 canopy trees, and the 2 median trees. Because I don't see anything else that differs from that. That you didn't amend the original one from a staff recommendation.
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm clear, give us what staff is actually, what their recommendation would be in this case then, if that could be done at this time.
Staff's recommendation originally to the original request was a 1.5 foot, 21.5% deviation to the required 7-foot minimum rear setback requirement of LDC section 4.15B6, accessory pool patio and screen enclosure requirements to allow the construction of a pool patio decking and screen enclosure with a minimum setback of 5.5 feet. And the other deviation, which is related to that, is a 1 foot, 9% deviation to the maximum height requirement of LDC section 4.15B3, accessory pool patio and screen enclosure requirements to allow the construction of a screen enclosure with a maximum height of 12 feet at the minimum rear setback of 5.5 feet. And our condition was also based on, I'll read the condition that we have originally put. The applicant, page 4 in your original report. It's the condition is the applicant shall install 2 canopy trees on the south side of the property and 2 medium trees on the north side of the screen enclosure to further mitigate the visual impact of the proposed pool screen enclosure. The plant material must be maintained by the owner. Here I'd like to make a comment that actually the applicant was proposing in the original request to plant 2 canopy trees. As you can see in attachment 4. Actually, he's saying 2 trees on the left side of the pool. This will provide shade and beauty to all the neighbors.
Yes.
I correct. It's not written canopy trees.
In this attachment,
And we added 2 medium trees. That was discussed. I believe it's a valid, reasonable comment to be worried about the sun on a pool.
I
So
understood.
that would be
and
fine.
I just want to be, because again, it's based on recommendation, but right now, the recommendation is not to approve the current revised application. I just want to make sure that I know if this is one of the options, what, you know, if there was any conditions, you know, the conditions of the trees, the 4 trees at the time, if that was a staff request or, because we didn't really have a DRC approval for that, whether or not DRC put those conditions on there through the original request.
No, that was a staff's recommendation.
Thank you.
And the one that you have, the condition that you have in your second report is what DRC recommended.
Thank you. And real quick, and I apologize for dragging this on, but by definition, I mean, I understand canopy tree, a medium tree by city definition, what would that constitute?
To be a
Height,
ligustrum, crepe myrtle. We have in our land development code for the friendly list, which has examples and lists of what is a canopy tree and what are the medium or small trees. So
Okay.
you would have to choose from one of these trees.
And again, and the reason I'm asking this is because if I want to consider this tonight, we had canopy trees. That's what we looked at when we first came in, plus a couple medium trees. What I don't want to see is just 2 queen palms put up. You know, they don't mitigate, you know.
No, palms are not
effectively.
considered medium trees.
Okay, and that really is the answer I was looking for. Okay. Yeah, I have somewhere else to go, but I'll defer.
Okay. Ms. Hughes?
Thank you.
I'm looking, on attachment 4, it looks like that came from the contractor as opposed to the applicant for the property. Do you have any record where the applicant actually sent you these requests and these specifications that talk about the minimum necessary setback?
As
the applicant has to get permission from the property owner that they can represent that property owner with the application. So with that in mind, when an applicant gives us information, we have taken it as, which we are legally right to do that it's the owner who's requesting this. That the owner and the applicant have conferred with each other on the request, and that this is from the owner.
So that's an assumption. We don't really know that the applicant, the homeowner, actually saw this before it came to you. He wasn't copied on it, or? I'm just looking at because the staff's recommendation is really pretty strong, and that's what I'm looking at, is you're saying because the original request specifically said that was minimum necessary for the project, that's what you're basing your current, thank you.
And just one, if you look at attachment 4, which is the letter that we got, it was an email actually. It was forwarded to Mr. No, it wasn't. It's about Mr. Prigg. He was not copied on that.
Does anyone else have questions of staff?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Wright?
had memory recall here. Real quick, just the conditions of the tree installation. There really isn't any timeline. How is that, just for my purpose, how is that enforced? How do they, is it the condition of the CO, the final approval of the pool, or is it part of the permit? How does that get enforced?
Are you asking as to when the trees have to be
Yeah,
installed?
I'm just looking at when do the trees have to, before they get the final clearance on the acceptance by the city, do the trees have to be installed, or can they come back 6 months after the fact and do that? Just really looking at when the timeline is.
There is a development order, which is attached to your package, which is a deviation development order, which mentions, in this case, I haven't updated it yet because
Right.
we haven't decided, which mentions the condition. And our inspector looks at that after the
So the trees really have to be installed
yes.
to get approved at the time of construction of the pool or before completion?
Yes.
Okay, no, answers my question. Thank you.
And Mr. Wright, I'm not sure if your answer was clarified in terms of the condition, staff's condition. Staff conditions remains the same.
Correct, with 4 trees, 2
Yes.
canopy, 2,
That's exactly right.
yeah, that's, thank you.
Are there other questions of staff? I have one. In looking at this, the new boundary survey that we were given, since it's a little bit bigger, it's easier for me to see it. Was there any discussion with the applicant about possibly turning the pool slightly so that it's not going as far into the setback? Because it appears that one side of when you look at the side of the pool that's closest to the house, it appears that one side is closer than the other, and the other is the one that is protruding more into the setback. Is there any discussion of?
There was no discussion about that.
There was a discussion at the DRC meeting about that, and you'll probably want to ask the applicant the reason why it cannot be moved in closer to the house.
Okay. Would you come back up to the podium, please? Identify yourself again for the record.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Adam Koyman, and I live at 784 South Lake Claire. The reason why is because the elite roof that we're speaking of, in order to give Mr. Prigi and his family some shade, there's a down post that comes down, and where it's going to hit down on the deck in order to provide the support, that distance is required in order to make that happen. And as you can imagine, if you're physically out there and you have tables and chairs and your family's out there, when those posts are in the way, it's difficult to walk between the post and the edge of the pool. So we were trying to give him enough room so an average person's hips can walk through there and have a comfortable place to spend afternoons. There's a lot of sun, obviously, which is what you're wanting. But in any case, that was the reason for that. And that's why Mr. Priegi wanted that extra 6 inches, because 6 inches doesn't sound like a lot, but it can be a lot when you're talking about the distance between a post and the edge of the pool, and you're walking with a tray in your hand or something like that.
So exactly where are the posts?
The posts are going to come down. There's going to be, basically there's going to be an elite roof structure, which is going to be about 8 feet in the air, and the posts are going to come out 6 feet and then down. And then that will be the roof area and come down, and then that leaves a minimum amount of space between the edge of the post and the water's edge. So that's why it would really, really help. Then also you have to consider on the back side, if you're going to clean your pool or walk around the entire project, then the back side of the pool, you're reducing the amount of space between the edge of the pool and the back of the screen enclosure. So in order to be able to walk around and clean the whole pool and brush the walls down, we'd like to maintain a certain distance so the folks can do that. And I don't know if I'm allowed to comment on any previous statements that are made or not, if you would give me permission.
You may.
Okay. The 1.5 to 2.0 issue on here is 100% my fault. Mr. Priegi, I had done the math incorrectly on that, and I had come to a 28% deviation, which I thought was going to be the maximum that would be allowed. Mr. Priegi had gone ahead and told me that 2 foot would actually still maintain a 28.6, which was under the 30, and I wasn't able to make that happen in time for the DRC last week. So that mathematical error is why that 1.5 was there instead of the 2.0. And that's why we respectfully requested and humbly respected. And sir, I want to apologize. I was being humble and just, I didn't, if I spoke out of turn at all, I sincerely apologize. But the reason for the deviation request to the deviation last week was because of that mathematical error that I had made. So I just wanted to make it surely known that it's my mistake and Mr. Priegi had requested it, and if I had done it correctly, he would not be in the position that he's in right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions of staff? Mr. Lopez?
Do we know how wide that pool is?
How
The width of the pool? Do we know exactly?
the applicant, I believe, can answer that because these dimensions are not here.
That's what I'm asking.
Sir, can you come back up to the podium again?
And I am so sorry, sir, I did not hear your question.
How wide is the pool?
The pool is 14 feet wide.
14 feet wide? At the widest section?
At the widest section straight across is,
Which is the section that's actually more in jeopardy, right?
yes, sir, that would be the area that's more in jeopardy.
Is there any consideration that we could cut that down by half an inch?
There would be a consideration. The only issue is the average pool for that type of home, and I do understand what you're saying. We were just trying to maintain an average when you consider resale value and things of those nature.
I have a pool.
Yeah.
I don't have any value to the house. So
Yeah.
That's here or there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's,
Please.
well, it's not so much resale value as it is to,
I have another question for you. You
Yes,
keep
sir.
talking about the shed, the overhang roof. Are you putting in a superstructure beam on the gutter side?
superstructure.
Yeah, on the gutter side?
No, sir.
Why not? Does that eliminate some of the posts that you will need on the downside?
We had not considered that.
That would be something to consider.
Yeah. If you're talking about a carrier beam,
There's a
That's-
super gutter it's a heavy beam, because
Yeah.
I have one that's 30 foot long, and I've only got 2 downpoles.
right. Well, and I agree with you on that. It is called a carrier beam. He is getting a 7-inch super gutter on the project. The 7-inch super gutter is going to be attached it basically gets attached to the house at the soffit area, so that's where the super gutter will be, which is roughly 18 inches off of the project. So, and also, just so you know, the back of his home is a gable, and because of that, the screen enclosure is going to attach actually onto the stucco and not onto the gable structure. So that kind of is a different way because of the back of the home is a gable with no lanai, covered lanai. It kind of changes the scope of that.
Any other questions? Thank you. Okay, well, if there's no other questions, what's the board's pleasure?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Pollack?
I would like to approve the deviation as submitted by the DRC.
Second?
Mr. Wright, that was you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we have a second. So the motion is to approve the deviation as recommended by the DRC. Is there any discussion? I'm just surprised that it doesn't appear anybody's considered reducing the size of this so that it doesn't push back into it. I'm not sure that it seems to be like too big of a pool for that size area. So I'm not sure that I can support the motion that's before us now. Is there any other discussion, Mr. Lopez?
I would also agree with you. That's where I was going with the size of the pool. Reducing that size down. We can make an amendment to it.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Wright?
as a, again, you're asking an opinion in this case, but as a person who has a large pool, I understand the value of it. I also have many neighbors that have pools that are average of 8 feet wide that you'd be scared to hit the other side if you jumped in. So, there's my logic. To me, a larger pool is more of an asset than a smaller pool. So, I don't have any personal problems with the uniform width, even if the widest point is 14. It's not 14 foot wide the whole way. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Is there any other discussion?
On the pool
Mr.
side,
Pollack?
oh, I'm sorry. On the pool size, I mean, we're talking about a 5-foot setback versus a 5.5. I mean, the 6-inch setback, I mean, I don't think the 6 inches makes a difference either way. And you know, I know that you were saying earlier that the previous code should not be taken into consideration, and I agree with you on that. But at the same time, you know, the house right behind it has 5 feet, and many of the other houses have the 5 feet. And, you know, I think I believe it still conforms with the neighborhood.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Wright?
I don't disagree with you. The problem is we can't set precedent by just ignoring codes as they stand. So
Right.
that's really my logic. It's not that I don't disagree, but
Right.
you know, we can't just change it at our whim in the sense that.
I understand that.
Yeah, if you look back at our staff report, one of the things that we're not allowed to consider are non-conforming uses or permitted uses of other land structures or buildings in the district. So the fact that other homes, pools are built to different setbacks, that's not something we can consider
Okay.
in making our decision on this. Is there any other discussion? Okay, the motion before us is the motion to approve the deviation as recommended by DRC. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? That's three to two. Motion carries. Okay, you've got your pool. Good luck. Okay, the next item on the agenda is public hearings. We don't have any of those. Discussion items. Does anyone have anything we need to discuss? One of the things that I've been told is that In the very near future, we're no longer going to have these books, but they're going to have laptops for us to use during the meetings. And that means then that the only way you can prepare ahead of time is to look at the material online. And hopefully, everyone will be excited about using computers and we'll look at it ahead of time.
This will save some trees.
Yep, we'll save some trees, that's for sure.
Medium or shade?
Okay, if there's no further discussion items, the future meeting dates are October 8th, October 22nd, and November 12th. Do we know if we have items for the October meetings?
We don't have any items at this time. There could be some that can be scheduled, but we don't have any items at this time.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So motion to adjourn.
Second.
Mr. Lopez, Mr. Wright, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned. We now have our work session to go into. So we'll call the meeting to order for the work session for the Land Development Code wrap-up. We'll turn it over to Teresa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We were also told that you'll be transitioning to the digital area here, right? So that's something that we also, we received that direction today that we should start working with you on probably the next meeting. We'll try to arrange that for the next meeting so that you all have laptops.
I didn't hear a word you said, I'm sorry.
Is it on? Okay, sorry.
I know I'm getting old, but I couldn't. My ears ring, so everything's muted to you, so I just figured it's just me.
What I said is that we are also told that you're going to have laptops for in the future, in the near future. We hope in the next meeting, we're not sure, but we'll have laptops set up here for the meetings. So today we have 3 subjects to discuss, and I changed the order to have so that we have approval process and accessory units first, because these 2 are the subjects that we need directions from you. And then we'll review the visual preference survey, the results of the survey that we posted online. Deborah and Jenna, if you want to come closer, because... Oh, okay. Great. Okay. We don't have the pointer today. So the approval process. These were the considerations that we took into account when we revised the approval process. We revised the role of the boards. We also were concerned about streamlining the process. We have a lot of pressure from developers, to have a more, an easier, smoother process and a shorter process in our review. So that was something that we also took into account. The other thing that we would also want the boards to take into account is that any changes in the process should be balanced out for staff. We are understaffed now, and we have the Land Development Code review to go through in the next year. So any new recommendation in the boards, I'm not saying that we won't support that. It's just something to take into account that it requires more memo preparation from staff, and we have to make things viable, right, for staff. So that's something that we also would like to raise. The other thing is that when we replace, any suggestion to replace DRC with PZA, another consideration is that DRC meets every week and PZA meets every other week. So the process gets longer for the applicant. So this is another consideration. For deviations, we had a good example today that deviation is something that we have to review how to approach it. We are, and we will discuss that, we are keeping the existing percentage, as it is, so 10% would be staff level. But we would also want to discuss how to improve the guidelines for denial, because it seems that it is automatic. It's an automatic, application, and you're granted with the 10% or the 20%, depending on the boards. But we would like to have it clearer. What are the conditions that we could use to deny an application, even at staff level? Yes. So this, I think I showed that to you in the last meeting, but this was just a research we did in our department on the deviations that have been processed from 2006 2013. And this is also a good guideline to see if we change something in the process, the amount of work that will come to that board if that board requires, if we change the deviation process. The majority of the deviations in this period was related to setbacks, exactly the case that we had today. So we are reevaluating the application fees. It was already approved by City Council, a 20% reduction across the board, but we are also promoting with a consultant, we will do that in the months ahead, a revision of our approval process in comparison to other cities. Right now, we just had like a temporary measure to reduce our fees 20%, but that's something that we want to go deeper to see what we can improve there. We also had we discussed, I think, briefly last time, the CAP, which is the Citizens Awareness Participation Plan that the city of Longwood and Sanford use, through which the developer is asked to go to the community before coming to the boards and present and raise the issues that the community think are important. And I think our recent cases with Dollar General, with some applications and development review process show that we could be better informed of what are the issues that the community are concerned with. So we are trying to propose a plan like that for the city, but it will be a customized plan for our situation. We also want to introduce the small impact site plans, and the next slide I will show a brief idea of how to do that. We also have to introduce the approval process for accessory units that we are going to discuss. So that's another, it's a new, would be a new application. And we also want to reevaluate the architectural review process, and we are going to discuss that too. The architectural review process, we need to clarify the process for the applicants. And we just discovered that there are two issues that are very controversial here in the city. Architecture is one of them, and signage. We want to incorporate signage into the architectural review when you have a new development, because it's really part of the architecture. It can be used as part of the architecture, the signage. And for those particular reviews, we are proposing that City Council will be the approval authority. So we would go straight to City Council. That's something that we haven't discussed yet with City Council, but that would take the pressure on staff. And we are okay with that, but if the code is the final decision, then we have to make that clear to the applicant. If City Council wants to have more say with the architectural review, then they should be the approval authority. We need to clarify the process for staff and also for applicants. The small-scale site development, we haven't had we don't have the formula yet, but we are discussing two possibilities. One for development and redevelopment that will be with a low impact, so we would link square footage and low impact, and for that case, we would request a lower fee. And what is that number? That's what we are discussing. Because here in Oviedo, we don't have large developments. So we are really trying to tackle the small business, a very small business that wants to come to Oviedo and does not need to pay, the high fees that we request for a larger business. And then for change of use, we have a lot of cases where people have, either houses or an office, and they are turning into something else. And for our code, that would be a change of use, and we would require from that small business the same requirements with a new site plan that we would require for any new development. And we want to make it more flexible for smaller, businesses to come to Oviedo, so that we don't have those vacant, small places. This is the table that we sent you, and we thank, all of you who sent the comments to us. And here we have, it's a little bit confusing, and I'll try to go through that with the things that we propose differently. You have 3 columns. For the land use administrator, the first one, we didn't provide 3 columns because there were there's, I think, 1 or 2 changes in that, and I'll show that. But for DRC, PZA, and City Council, we have 3 columns. The letters in black show the existing process. In red, we have staff recommendations, and in green, we have PZA recommendations. We would like, in the end today, if that is possible, that we have your, consensus, or if possible, because we will present that to City Council next week. It will be stronger if we have one voice in PZA to show them your opinion. So for adoption and amendment of comprehensive plan, we are proposing, and for adoption and amendment of LDC and official zoning map, we are proposing to take DRC out of the equation. So DRC will not recommend anything. That is staff recommendation. And we have discussed that with Brian too. So it's our recommendation. PZA we didn't change that, and we didn't change the approval. For annexation petition, we propose to, again, take DRC and go straight to City Council. We had one proposal from PZA to do the same thing, and that is shown in green. Appeal of land use administrator decision as to the minimum requirement from LDC. We are proposing to cut, and that is kind of tricky here, but we are proposing to cut the A. When you cut the A, it doesn't show, but we are proposing to take DRC out of as a recommending body, as an approval body, and transfer that to PZA. We also had the same proposal from PZA. Then we jump for appeal of DRC decision. We didn't change anything, and we didn't have any recommendation from you. Then appeal of DRC decision for minimum land development code requirements as other than building permit. We have 2 recommendations from PZA. One that PZA would recommend and City Council will approve, so it would be a new step. And another one that PZA would approve and City Council will be dismissed from this process. Then the next ones, appeal of PZA decision, development regional impact, PUD zoning map amendment, PUD with statutory development agreement that we don't have anymore. We didn't change the process. For PUD with non-statutory development agreement, again, we don't have it anymore, do we, Deborah? That is not a,
No, we don't.
but we still have to have the process
Exactly,
in
just in
place,
case.
just in case, yeah. So for that, we are proposing that PZA is taken from the process. So would be recommending DRC and approval to straight to City Council. Non-statutory development agreement and amendment, again, the same thing. We try to see the nature of the boards, and what we discussed is that we were trying to give DRC and City Council more power with development review. So we also changed that for Master Land Use Plan and PSP. And for PZA, we wanted to have like a role as the previous board.
Board of Adjustment.
Board of Adjustments. So it was more land use related, comp plan related, more planning related. And so we took off some of the attributions that were more development review. That is just our recommendation. So the next. This one, again, the PSP, we did the same thing as the Master Land Use Plan. So we took PZA, final plat and replat. We took DRC out. We went straight to City Council. Plat and replat are very technical documents. Usually when the review is done, we don't usually change it through the boards. So that was the idea, that we should then take straight to City Council. Then there was, for site development order, private project, deviations between 11 and 20%. We had one suggestion from PZA to remove the approval from DRC and go straight to PZA. Then site development order between deviations between 21 and the 30%. We had three types of suggestions from PZA. One that DRC would not recommend anything, PZA would recommend, and City Council would approve, and another one that PZA will be the approval authority, and DRC would just recommend, and a third one that the third one is the one that PZA would recommend. You have three different, options here, and these are, for instance, a case that we could have one suggestion from PZA. That would be the ideal situation for us to present to City Council. What we are proposing in this case is to take the development agreement out of the process when we request a deviation above 30%, and take every deviation above 20% to City Council with a recommending body from DRC, for a recommendation from DRC. Then we have a site development order that is city related, a city project, compliant or non-compliant, so with deviations. We are also recommending that it goes straight to City Council for approval. And these are, projects that the city is undertaking, is the applicant. For all the other deviations, PZA proposed the same process that, approving would go to PZA in 2 cases. In other cases, they would just, the idea was to be a recommending body. And for us, what we proposed, again, was to simplify and we don't have it here? Yeah, let me see if that's it. Okay, so that's the one on top. No, that is the new downtown zoning district. Oh, that's the one that we would, I already talked about that, yeah. That we would be the ones recommending, and City Council would approve any deviation. So we would remove all those other steps. Yes, that's right. The next one would be the new downtown, that today is land use administrator who approves any deviations, and DRC is proposing to have recommending steps and then the approval to PZA. So the land use administrator would just recommend, DRC would recommend, and PZA would approve. Eminent domain, there is also a proposal to cut the approval authority from the land use administrator and the DRC and move it to a city council. Then we changed, again, giving the same type of idea to simplify for the building permits, but this time we are giving the authority to PZA for every deviation above 20%. And this is the red line row over there. Then we have building permit, other development permits for city project. Again, PZA kept the same logic, and we also simplified and tried to propose that for every city project with deviation, it will be a recommending body. The staff would recommend, and then city council would approve. And the last one, the new downtown zoning for building permits, PZA proposed the same thing as for the site development order, that would go to PZA instead of land use administrator. So these are our suggestions, and we will discuss with City Council next week. And we needed to have your input. What is your, if we present the way it is, that is fine too, or if you want to discuss and come with one proposal. And we can leave to the end. We can, how would you like to?
Can I ask a question about
Sure.
this? So if I understand staff's recommendations, PCA would no longer be considering anything to do with the actual development part.
That was the rationale behind, where the development review process would be more related to land use, zoning, change of use, that kind of thing.
Okay. So do you want us to get a consensus from the board on each one of these different items?
If you are comfortable, we can do whatever you decide. If you're comfortable that we present different options, because right now we have different options from PZA. If you would like to discuss and present one option, we can also do that. I think it would be better for us.
Just the ones that have multiple PZA recommendations?
Yeah, or go through if everybody, because sometimes when you have only one, it's just because just one person recommended. I don't know if it's the consensus, of the board. So if you want to review the everywhere where PZA recommends and see if you are comfortable with one or two options. I mean, we can present whatever you decide.
Okay, what's the board want to do here? Do we want to consider these things line by line, where it has a green letter in it? Mr. Wright, you always have something to say.
Based on personal, I don't like the idea of not having any input into development. I understand the logic, but, typically, probably the reason I won't fight it is because what I've seen so far with the preliminary subdivision plan is all the engineer has to do is write that it'll be taken care of at the final engineering plans, and that's his green light to go through us anyways, no matter what pretty much comments we've had, so it's not really a bigger issue, so.
Madam Chair, I think this is the PZA's opportunity to tell the city what they would like to see. And of course, staff is going to have a recommendation. PZA in itself will have a recommendation, and then you will have city council. So they will listen to staff, and they'll also listen to the PZA board. So I think this is your opportunity now to speak to city council and say, city council, this is what we as a board would like to do. We're interested in doing this now. We used to do that, and now we want more duties. So we would like for the board to go through this list tonight and give us your recommendation. So if you could start line by line, it would help us to let us know what the board would like to do.
Okay. The first item then is adoption of amendment to comprehensive plan. Mr. Lopez?
Just a quick question, just for me personally, I guess maybe everybody does, and I'll just be ignorant. Can someone tell me what the PH stands for and R stands for?
Public hearing,
Okay.
Yes.
and the R's for recommended,
I just want to confirm that.
and the A is the approval. Approving vote. Okay, so the first one, adoption of amendment to comprehensive plan. So this one, as I understand it, the only change would be to take DRC out of that.
That's right. In our recommendation, yes.
By statute, this board is the preparer of the comprehensive plan and any amendments to it. So by statute, this board and city council are the only boards who need to review and adopt.
So I'm assuming that's the case for the top three, then adoption of an amendment to the LDC and adoption of an amendment to the official zoning map,
Yes, ma'am.
all three. Okay, so does anyone have a problem with taking DRC out of the picture for those three items? Okay, so we have a consensus, we agree on that one.
Okay.
On those three. Okay. The next one is the annexation petition. Staff and PCA look like we both recommend taking DRC out of that and going from the land use directly to
City Council.
city council. Do we have a consensus on that? Am I seeing Paris now?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Appeal of land use administrative decision minimum LDC requirement. And both staff and PCA recommend that taking the approval away from DRC and giving it to PCA. Do you have a consensus on that?
Yes.
Agreed.
Okay. We skip down to 2, appeal of DRC decision, minimum LDC requirement other than building permit. Right now, it goes from the land use administrator to city council. there's one R for PZA to be recommending and one for PZA to be the approving body. And then one for council to be approving.
On this one, I was the one that did the PZA as the approving body, and the reason I mean, the next line, appeal the PZA decisions by the city council, I think that's where it, where it should lie. We anything below us, they can bring the appeals to us, and then if someone has a problem with us, then they can bring the appeal to the city council.
Pardon?
I said, I agree with that. It makes logic. It's a congressional law.
Okay, so then we would, we make PZA the approving body. Okay?
Okay.
So we have a consensus on that.
Yeah.
Question, if
PZA will
DRC,
be
if a DRC decision is in need of an appeal by the applicant, the land use administrator makes a recommendation to it. But if it stops at us and we approve it, then it's done at that point. And the problem, well, again, the potential problem with that is that, we should, again, in most cases, decisions like that, we usually are the recommending board in a sense, and then the final decision still always rests with council. So, again, I guess I could see that being a potential problem for the stopgap, for an appeal,
But we are for the one above it. Appeal DRC minimum LDC required building permit application. We're the approving body for that one now. And then this next item is anything other than a building permit.
Okay, I'll back in.
Logic rule.
Okay, so do we have a consensus then for PZA to be the approving body? Okay. And we come on down to PUD with non-statutory development. Staff is recommending to take PZA out of that one, and the next one, PUD with statutory development and a non-statutory development agreement or amendment. Staff's recommending to take PZA out of those and have it go from DRC straight to council. I'm assuming from what Teresa said, anything to do with development, they were taking us out. What's the board's thought on those?
I still disagree with skipping the PZA in a recommendation and going straight to city council. I think that it should remain DRC to PZA and then to council. Just in general, my thought process when I was working through this, if something is coming from the DRC, it should go to the PZA, either for the PZA to recommend it to the council or PZA to approve it. Really, we shouldn't have things skipping over PZA, going from DRC to city council. I mean, that was, in general, that was what my thought process was when I was doing this.
Okay. Anyone else?
I haven't been on long enough to know if there are usually changes, suggestions when it goes to this. Is it, I don't mean to say rubber stamp disrespectfully, but do we make suggestions? Do things happen at this level with those types of activities usually? They do?
I feel like they do. I mean, I feel like, sometimes things get missed or overlooked, and we kind of catch them before they get to city council. It's another set of eyes looking at it, especially on larger projects.
So, I'm
Is it to streamline? Yes, that's
Because
the,
I think one of the things that we're accused of, it takes so long to get things done
As a city,
as a city.
not us.
No, I'm sorry. as a
in
city.
general, yes, yeah.
You take forever.
Every 2 weeks, really?
But no, I mean, that's a perception that we have. So I think if we're going to look at this, then we really need to sit down and say to ourselves, how much more time is it going to take for the whole process, or do we want to streamline it ourselves, you know? I mean, I know, I mean, I'm on both sides of the fence. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but, because when I talk to people coming into the city, they don't want to come here because it takes too long to get things done.
And we were the same way. I mean, we felt the same way. I mean, among ourselves, I mean, we were questioning why should we take PCA here and there. So we had to go through this process to have a reason, and we tried to do the same thing with DRC. So, and again, we also trying to see the history. For instance, annexation. Nobody really says no, you know, to annexation. So why to add steps into the process that gives a lot of, you know, and we're not trying to spare us of work. That's not the, you know, that was not the logic. But why to have additional work, additional time for the applicant if it's not really bringing so much value? So that was the case that we used for the annexation, for instance, for taking, you know.
And we should take it away from the DRC and just bring it straight to us.
Well, Madam Chair, can I just add that those two applications, the PUD with the statutory development agreement, we don't get those. We used to have those with the previous developments, like your Alafaya Woods. That was a statutory development agreement. It has expired. You have your Twin Rivers development agreement, which has expired. The only thing with Alafaya Woods that's still active is the zoning classification agreement because it doesn't expire, but it's not really a development agreement. Now, all of our PUDs are zoning classifications, so you can't just come into the city and request a planned unit development without there being a PUD zoning. So what you all see today is the PUD zoning, and with the zoning, you'll see the development agreement as well as the conceptual development plan. So we rarely have the PUD with the statutory development agreement. People opt for the non-statutory, and then you won't find a PUD, a new PUD, without it being a zoning. So you will see the PUD zoning. So it's really for the existing PUDs.
The PUD with the statutory, or the PUD with non-statutory?
PUD with the non-statutory.
I mean,
And that's in an existing PUD. You may find where in Twin Rivers, we are looking at a proposed development. It was a statutory development agreement, but it has expired. Still has the PUD zoning, and so they will have to come in with a new development agreement. So that's going to be the non-statutory agreement associated with the PUD. They're not going to come in with the statutory development agreement. So those two were pretty limited in terms of how many times we would review it.
So then what about the next one, the non-statutory development agreement?
You'll see that with the site plans. The non-statutory development agreement, you'll see those type agreements associated with site plans that are over 30%. Or it could be a sign over 30% deviations. They're associated with the deviations.
Although now we are trying to propose to take this out, like to take the development agreement out of the 30%. If
But today it is associated
that's,
with.
yeah. Or the enclave, for instance, was a development agreement. That was not a PUD, right?
The enclave.
At Sanctuary?
They had a non-statutory development
Yes.
agreement. That is exactly right, because they were sharing infrastructure
Yeah.
with the church. So those are more common.
Okay, so what's the board's pleasure on the PUD with non-statutory development agreement? Those are only on PUDs that are existing currently.
I would leave it the way it is. with, I mean, the keep it existing where the PZA still is a,
PZA's
recommending.
Okay. Is that the consensus? PZA not in place. Okay, then the next one is non-statutory development. Staff's recommending taking PZA out. What's the pleasure on that?
I would leave the PZA's recommending body.
Okay. The next one is not changing, the master land use plan. Again, taking PZA out.
I don't understand that one. You know, the staff's logic was that the PZA would be used for planning purposes, and I know that can be, the master land use plan is kind of a mix between development and planning, but I still think that we should, you know, at least review it and be a recommending body on that.
I would tend to agree with you. I'd rather see that stay on PZA.
Master land use plan, keep, yeah.
Well, I'm conflicted.
Or, you know, they voted
Are you
already?
conflicted with the timing?
No, I'm just, you know, here's the thing, the way I look at this. We're, I guess, what are we looking at as far as our role? You know, I mean, if the goal is to assist the city into expediting the process, a couple of us agree that the development process may be a little bit slower than it should be as a city, then taking us out of the master land use plan, some of this, the PUD information, you know, as staff has recommended, does make sense. Okay? Personally, there's nothing I'd like better than just to go through subdivision, you know, again, but that's my profession, not necessarily my role here, you know, so that's why I say I'm conflicted, but I don't have a problem skipping us in those cases because it does accomplish what staff in the city's trying to do based on expediting the process from private side, increasing, you know, their efficiency in a sense and reducing their burden from it, because it's one less package that they have to produce for us. It's one less meeting that the developer and everybody has to go through. But on the same side of it, though, you know, while I say that, I'm still in favor of us taking on more necessarily roles. And to me, where that happens is that, you know, DRC can be skipped and go to council. PZA can be skipped and go to council. You know, where to help make that same thing where you reduce the number of, or not increase the number of packages would be, is if there are things that the city council has at their approval level that I would consider be minor, you know, where this would be the final recommending board for approval. That's where I thought I would see us do that. So the same logic where you can reduce your number of packages that you put together for a specific item instead of going to 3 or 4 in this case with the land use administrator, is that, you know, DRC would lose some, we would take on that role. You know, PZA would lose some, city council takes on that role. And versus, you know, and then there's probably some stuff since council's taking on more, that there was stuff that they really do that they don't really need to approve that would come back to us as the approval board. You know, so that it balances in a sense and accomplishes what staff wants, is to reduce the burden, you know, and doesn't put an unnecessary burden on anybody else. So yeah, that was long-winded, I apologize, but that's,
No,
I mean, there's nothing I like better than to have, you know, do certain things, but in this process, you know, the PUD stuff, the subdivision plans, anything that's really set with development, you know, if it goes from DRC, which staff is competent to look at, and it goes to city council, I don't really have a problem with that, so. Because by taking it away and basically going against staff's record, we're not really helping them in really any case, you know. We're making them do one extra step through the process, and they're again, it's not accomplishing the goal. If our goal is basically, look, we don't want to, and I hate to say this word, but we don't want to affect our kingdom of what we control, you know, I mean, then maybe it makes more sense to do it that way, but in this case, if we want to work, you know, and be part of the process, it makes sense to eliminate a step if we can, so.
Ms. Hughes?
Just another perspective. I think everything makes perfect sense about trying to be more efficient from a building perspective, but also if you take on the citizens of the community from their point of view, I don't think that they would be saying, let's expedite things and let that big development come in here fast and furious. I think they would appreciate another set of eyes. I think they would appreciate the diligence that we put into some of these things. From my point of view, some of the big things are more important. I think from a community perspective, are they as worried about a setback of a pool in one small neighborhood as much as they're worried about a huge development of 600 homes or 200 homes coming in and having another set of eyes or another development process look at that. So, looking from a community perspective, I do think it makes a lot of sense to shift some responsibilities around to keep staff's work down, but I think you have to also look at what you're talking about, and some of these have a lot more gravity than other things, and I think when it's the big things with community impact, it does make sense to have a three looking at it.
And overall, when you're talking about a approval process, DRC meets on Mondays, correct?
On Thursdays,
Oh, on Thursdays, okay.
every Thursday.
So if the DRC met on a Thursday, we meet on a Tuesday, and then the following Monday, the city council meets, that's 2 weeks.
It doesn't work like that because we have to submit, the memos for city council, for instance, 2 weeks in advance. So,
And can I just interrupt? And not only do we need to submit 2 weeks in advance, City Council wants to know in their packet what
The recommendations.
What the recommendation was. We can't hand it to them at the meeting. It has to be included into the packet.
so that's, yeah.
2 weeks.
2 weeks, we have to submit the memos.
That's when
So
it's
that,
due.
for you, we also submit 1 week before. So, so we have to have DRC, the recommendation of DRC, then, prepare the following week, the memos for PZA, then that's the regular path that we, especially for larger projects.
Well, tonight was a perfect example. We didn't have the DRC's recommendation until we got here. And that's happened multiple times.
You're right, but for big projects, City Council has sent us a direction that they want to see the recommendations.
Well,
Plus,
why-
in some
but-
cases, in public hearing, we have to announce too. So we need to announce, for each meeting, for the Land Development Code amendment that I presented last week, we had to announce that before. So we did the PZA last week. This is going to City Council on the 7th of October. So we need to have, each board one at a time. So in some cases, it's lengthier. We're not saying that you should not propose. These are just considerations, right? But it's not it cannot be as compacted as we would like.
And if I can add, each board has the right to continue items. Sometimes DRC will continue items. Sometimes the PZA may continue items. City Council can do the same thing. So we can't schedule it back to back because we're unsure what each board will recommend. So we have to have room in there, just in case one of the boards decide to not recommend approval or to continue it, and to give the applicant time to change it if they do decide to continue for a specific reason.
We are talking about the master land use category, correct?
Yes, that was the last one, yeah.
Well, it looks like they're taking out the DRC and they're taking us out and just going straight to council.
No, DRC's still in it,
Still
it's in red.
recommendation.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Can I just add that that category is also pretty limited? You can't just come to the city and just apply for a master land use plan anymore. Now the master land use plans, they are associated with the rezonings. So you will see it when they change their zoning to a PUD. That's when you'll see the master land use plan and the development agreement.
So you're saying at one point or another, we're going to see it anyway?
You're gonna, yeah, because you can't just come and apply for a master land use plan.
We would see the project, but we wouldn't see these agreements and plans and be able to comment on that.
You would for the zoning. when it's a PUD, that's when you'll see the master plan, and then you'll also see the development agreement when it's a change of zoning to planned unit development. And you actually have one that will be coming up pretty soon near the Oviedo Marketplace. I'm sorry, Oviedo Mall area,
Old habits hard to die.
where it's a PUD and they have a master land use plan as well as a development agreement.
You know, I think I'm somewhat conflicted as well. Considering what Ms. Hughes said, I would rather see us involved in the bigger developments. Looking at it, looking at some of the smaller.
Madam Chairperson, may I?
Yes, Jim.
Deborah, I think that the master land use plan, like you said, it can be associated with change of zoning, but it can also be done independently. I just want to add that because you don't need to change the zoning. You can have different uses that are being proposed that are allowed in that zoning, and you can also put some type of infrastructure which is shared, and that would cause master land use plan too. So I think that you have both.
That would be associated with the development agreement.
But
The
it can be a
non-statutory
master.
With the non-statutory development agreement, which is something I believe you all will be, that's a non-statutory.
You guys have recommended taking us out of that.
Okay, that's where you would see that master, when it's shared infrastructure, because the development agreement is required. But there is no single application unless it's an existing, like Alafaya Woods, their planned unit development. If they happen to change something on that master plan, they would, that's where, but it wouldn't necessarily be a development agreement. It's those existing old PUDs where there may be a change in the master plan.
Well, it's a matter of interpretation.
Madam Chair, can we just add ourselves back in? I think that's pretty much general consensus that I'm seeing.
Okay, so we've added ourselves
Mr.
back
White
in
is-
on the
is a
master
no.
land use.
Okay.
Gentleman sitting next to you is a no.
But the consensus is,
Consensus is. Okay,
To maintain, yeah. The
master land use.
BZA is a recommending body. No, not yet. I think they didn't move. That's,
Okay, the next one's the preliminary subdivision plan.
yes.
The recommendation is for it to go from DRC to city council.
Again, same thing.
Yeah, it's,
Okay.
And as well, I also added us on the final plat. Going back to your point, we see the preliminary and then it disappears after that, and we never know if our recommendations were incorporated into the final plat or not.
just to be clear too, final plat is not final engineering drawings, it's just
the subdivision, yeah. So,
It's basically what the surveyor presents to
Yeah.
it gives the geometry of the lots. It really has nothing
Yeah.
to do with site development, it has nothing to do with, it's just it's basically like these lot surveys that we got tonight for that one lot. It's the entire subdivision, just all the geometry for the lot.
it's almost a
No drainage,
legal
no trees,
document. Yeah.
Nothing, it's just, it's how the county gets recorded for their plat.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it really doesn't, I mean,
There's no bearing.
it has no bearing for us, I mean,
So-
as far as any recommendations we would make.
So where's the final subdivision plan? I don't see it on there.
That just goes to staff, doesn't it?
That's the site development order, SDOs, right? So those are
Okay.
the site development orders that actually get the final engineering drawings. and
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
after
Final
everything's been
engineering plan.
incorporated from the PSP.
okay.
Okay, so for the preliminary subdivision plan, is the consensus for us to remain the recommended body on preliminary subdivision?
If you're going to stick with the plan,
mean, again, I go with the consensus of the board, but, you know, again, my,
He's like me, we both want to move forward faster.
you know, and again, not to beat a dead horse, but, the preliminary subdivision plan has the ability for them to put in information that doesn't have to be in there, it's just generic, it's preliminary, by hence of this word, that they can, if there's things that are not addressed specifically, they can finish them at the site development order, which staff takes care of, okay? So, by the time it gets to us, and if, you know, we've seen two probably this past summer, you know, we have very limited ability to influence the direction that preliminary subdivision plan goes. Calculations can still be preliminary, lot counts can be preliminary. You've had frustrations because while you still think the lots are, you know, personally need to be bigger, it still is within the codes of our city and allows them to develop at that density. So we have very, very little or limited ability. I mean, at best, all we can do is catch a mistake, you know, something that, you know, wasn't done correctly. You know, it's a more of a graphical error or a typographical error. And as Ms. Hughes had said, you know, I mean, again, while the citizens probably would like another set of eyes, by the time it gets to us, there's really not a lot that we can do to it in a sense to really change the effect of it. That doesn't come until staff sees it, you know, and approves the final documents, which we don't see anyways. So I understand, and truly I do understand what she was indicating, but it doesn't, it kind of, again, goes back to me, it kind of defeats the purpose of really helping to improve the process. And I'm not saying expedite for the development, I'm talking for improving the process as a whole, through this board, through the city staff, through outside, you know, as a whole, it gets, you know, it's not just one side for people on the outside, so. That's why I'm kind of saying no to all this. I'm again, not really consensus, but.
You know what, in that discussion, I mean, I kind of agree with you on that. I mean, it's a preliminary, and I'm just flip-flopping now, I'm sorry, but it's a preliminary, like you said, it's a preliminary subdivision plan that ends up getting approved by city council anyways.
And trust me, I do, again, and that should have no bearing on it, but I do this as a living, so it's very frustrating for me sitting here because while I know something should be done a different way, all you have to do is it'll be taken care of at final engineering, and it doesn't matter what I say at that point, you know, whether I know it's wrong or right, they still have the right to put that in there because it's preliminary. It's just to get them to start the process. You asked me the question.
Now that Mr. Pollak is flip-flopped.
Mr. Pollock's having a discussion. No, but that's important, the whole person of eyes, if you're saying that it's not helpful or it's not meaningful.
You know, again, and it is helpful. I think it's helpful. My personal opinion is that I'd like to be able to do that. I would like to have that ability to do that. But we're not really helping. We're not solving what the initial problem is here. Is staff's understaffed, city's understaffed, and we're trying to improve the whole process as a whole. So, and that's what I look at. And again, and logically, what I said was that I thought that the balance would be that there might be stuff from the city council perspective that would come back to us as an approval process. So you know, instead of going through a 4-step process, you basically go through 3 or even 2-step processes by flip-flopping roles in certain aspects. And really, all I'm seeing right now is it's either skip PCA or skip DRC, and everything goes to the council.
Right.
And that's not necessarily the way I thought I would see it go. And I'll be honest, it's my fault because I failed to do my homework, okay, and turn this in. So first and foremost, that's my responsibility.
There is still a chance today, so that's fine.
Well, what if we recommended on that one, PZA is the approving body and city council? I mean,
You're not getting that one passed down?
Hey, good luck on that one.
I'm just making a suggestion.
That's I'll tell you, I understand the thought process, I even cross my head too, but that puts a serious amount of responsibility on this board to approve a preliminary subdivision plan, you know, and and again, you correct me if I'm wrong, but from a legal standpoint, that's why the city's paid to take that responsibility, not us. You know, we're an advisory board, you know, and really, we do comp plan and land development, that's our role.
All right.
I'm not trying to, I would have been quiet if you hadn't said anything, so.
So we're gonna change it back to the last one?
No, I think the master land use plans are a little bit different than the subdivision.
So preliminary subdivision, you have a consensus to go with staff's recommendation? Do we want to go back and reconsider any of those other we just did, or are we leaving those? Do you have a consensus to leave those the way they are?
I'd rather change master plan, leave it the way the board has just recommended, or the staff has recommended, but that's just me. Because other stuff is gonna come through us anyway eventually.
That's fine.
So the master land use, now we're going to
Just leave it.
accept staff's recommendation?
That's me, that's my personal opinion,
I'm fine with that, too.
because eventually it's all gonna come back.
Yeah, that's
That's
fine.
my opinion.
Okay, we have a consensus. Okay, back up to the master land use.
Sorry.
We're going with staff's recommendation.
Okay, we got that.
Okay. Now we're at the final plat and replat. That one, is there consensus then to go with staff's recommendation, take PCA?
Just to take DRC
Or
out.
I'm sorry, take DRC out?
I'm fine with that.
Okay. With the consensus on that one. Okay, we don't have a change until we get down to site development order.
Let me just clarify, sorry, for the final plat and replat, do you all agree that we take DRC and go straight to city council? Okay,
We're going with your
yeah,
recommendation.
okay.
Okay, the site development order private project. Deviation of 21% to less than 30. Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Site development order deviation 11% to less than 20. Right now, that is DRC. And we've got one on here to change it to approving PZA.
I mean, here's your final, I mean, all these is your final look. And the land use administrator is, you know, approving two of them. DRC's approving one, and city council's approving them, and we're pretty much out of the loop unless it's 30% or greater. I mean, and that's, yeah, I mean, that, and this is the final, this is where the rubber meets the road right here, and we're out of the loop. I mean, out of all of them, I would think we would want to be in the loop on these.
If you do this, if I speak out of order, just thank you. If we do that, we really, unless you put staff in as a recommending body, they have to see it. They're the ones that have to be involved in it
Right.
at some point. So we can't just take out DRC and then it goes from basically the city manager to us, you know, per se. There has to be, we would have to add a second step in there. In this case, we'd be increasing the process by having to have them recommend it before it can come to us for approval.
Well, the land use administrator can recommend it. We could skip DRC.
Would the 11 to less than 20?
For, yes.
the one with the most impact to the community overall.
So do we have a consensus then 11 to 20 stays with PRC?
I would agree.
That's fine.
Okay. Okay, so then 21 to less than 30. Right now it's land use, DRC,
Council.
and then council. That's one that I think ought to skip council and just have PZA as.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of things I was looking at.
Yeah.
Come back
Okay.
to us.
Okay, so do we have a consensus in that one PZA should be approved?
Yes,
Okay.
and DRC remains as recommended.
The city council would be removed.
Right.
Yes.
21 to 30, BZA would approve. So City Council would not approve anymore, BZA would approve.
21 to 30 is.
21, SGO, private project, yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, and then over 30, let's stay the same.
Yeah.
Then,
And just, well, that's, the red row would be our recommendation. So if you want to recommend something there too, I can propose, the way you're proposing now, but the way staff is proposing is to take these 21 to 30 and 30 with development agreement.
So why don't we just do 21?
What we are proposing, above 20 would go to city council. So if you want to propose there something.
So we can propose anything over 20 would come to us.
If you want. I mean, I won't show that as a prime, the first option, but if, I don't know,
Does that make sense?
if you want to, right? Include something there.
So, y-
That would eliminate one category.
so you're basically proposing to eliminate both of these highlighted and go with the one that's in red?
Yeah, because our logic is that we have two processes. One, they both go to city council anyway, the way it is right now, right? Above 21%, they go to city council. The difference is that above 30, they would require development agreement. Well, if they go to city council, the negotiation is already there. So why do we need development agreement for above 30%? So we are just simplifying the process, and development agreement is an additional step, which is more complicated because it is a legal document. So, for instance, today, if the applicant would like to have a deviation for more than 30%, we would require a development agreement. It doesn't make sense, and he could negotiate that with So we are trying to simplify the process. So we think above 20%, it goes to city council anyway. So we were just simplifying by taking these two different situations and taking the development agreement.
They would still have to provide mitigated techniques.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's a deviation. So you can still require certain things of the applicant because they need to provide the mitigated techniques. And what we've done in the past is use the development agreement as a negotiating tool. And so you can still negotiate with them because you'll have that mitigated technique section for the deviation.
So,
I'm sorry, Captain.
so the 1 to 9 that we had earlier, that one would not have come to us if it had gone straight to council since it's over 20%. I can't
I'm
see
still-
council.
Yeah, it's the next one. The other one, we are proposing that PZA would take the above 20%, right?
Okay.
You would, and we are, suggesting that.
So, to clarify, again, even though it says above 20%, it's still capped at 30. Anything above 30% doesn't really fall in this category because they're going to require a development agreement.
No, what we are proposing is that above 20%, it doesn't matter. You don't require a development agreement.
Okay.
You go to council
All right, so
anyway.
you're eliminating the whole development agreement
Yes.
process?
Yeah. For deviations.
for deviations.
To be less, so what you're saying is to eliminate some of the work, let council handle it.
Well, council will have to review both, but we don't add this additional legal process to have a development agreement in place. They would come in before council, and we'll have to negotiate the mitigated that techniques they would have to provide
With council on the spot.
with spot. Well, they would pass through DRC, right? Yes. Oh no, staff.
Just that.
Yeah.
Well, in this case, then, you're looking at what staff's recommendation is.
No, sorry,
you know,
DRC.
and
Sorry,
what-
DRC.
And what we asked, in a sense, 2 lines up, what I would suggest is use staff's recommendation, but change it so that PZA is the approving body, and just take that, and get rid of those other 2. Accomplishes the same thing, it's still only 3 steps, but it does what we asked in a sense, really, anyways. We were going to 21 to 30, we were asking to be approving body.
Does it matter the type of deviations? Because these could be associated with, let's say, a big box. Let's say a big box wants to come into Oviedo, and
Yeah.
you're laughing.
No, I know.
Let's say a big box wants to come into Oviedo, and they are requesting a deviation of, let's say they request a deviation of over 30%. That, if what you all are proposing tonight, that would have the effect of that site development order being approved by PZA, and it's not going before city council.
I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want
No,
that liability.
not, under that analogy, yes, that makes sense.
I wouldn't
If
want
you're
that
looking at
liability.
like a building permit, like a sign permit application where they want more than what is allowed, and it's over 30%, then you're looking at approving it under that circumstance too.
So again,
I guess
the
it really
situation we had
depends on the
today.
type of deviations.
The same analogy could be, though, based on what we said earlier, though, if they came in at 29.5%, large, big box, what you want to call it, and we basically, by putting us, we're still in that same situation.
For site development orders?
Yeah, one of the things that we just, a couple lines up, when we said the site development order for private project, deviation of 21 to less than 30, we had, as a consensus here, we said that we felt we should be the approving body.
Yeah.
So whether it's 29.5 or above 20, I mean, we're still,
So you're saying
Deal with that,
big
yeah.
box may try to go
they
in and
may
say,
Yeah.
come in at 29.5% just to get to us versus going to city council.
right. But then we can always defer to the city council, could we not?
They could appeal.
We could add that language in there, it's that you could refer to city council. But one of the things that we're planning to do with this new process is to send all architectural plans to city council, like Teresa mentioned before. So even though your board may be the approving authority, all the architectural plans will go before city council to review. So that may provide some type of protection for the board. If you all are the approving authority.
Well, why can't we, on these ones, why don't we just go with staff, well, take the 21 to 30 and the over 30 out like staff recommended, and then in the staff recommended one over 20, can PZA just be a recommending body and it goes to city council?
Yes.
And remove DRC, is that what you're saying?
Well, we can leave DRC in there.
DRC,
We don't have it right now as a proposal, but you can propose that.
Basically, all it does is it would leave the development of the 4th one that was being eliminated. What we're going to do is we're going to eliminate the 3rd line, right? So basically, it would say, instead of 21%, we would just change that to, greater than
Well,
7.
it would be this red line.
Yeah.
And
But
just
it's
add,
basically this line right here where we are the recommending body
correct,
for everything above 20%.
yes.
And then it eliminates these 2 here.
Mhm.
I'd be okay with that.
yeah.
Okay, so the red line that says site development or private project deviation greater than 20%. That's the line we're talking about.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So we would be adding in PCA as a recommending body.
That's correct.
These two
So do you agree that we eliminate
Yes,
the
we eliminate the
difference, the 21 to 30, that, and just propose what we are proposing?
And
With the,
add
yeah,
PZA
with
as a
adding
recommendation.
PZA as a recommended body. Okay.
Do you all want DRC to review it as well?
That kind of defeats the purpose.
What purpose- what do you mean by that?
It's going to streamline.
Well, but there is also, and I'll show both sides here. We want to streamline the process, but also deviations above 30%, you can also argue that we don't want to stimulate that, right, especially with the revision of the code.
Good point.
So if you put all the boards, I mean, that's a good,
That's a good point.
break. You have to go,
I can see that point.
so that could also be used,
Okay, so do we have a consensus then to go with the red line, deviations greater than 20 by adding PCA?
Yes.
And
Yes.
that in effect eliminates two lines up above it?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, then the next line down is the next several lines down are SDOs for city projects. My feeling is, I don't think it matters what we say in there, council's going to do what they want to. It's a
Pretty much.
project. So
Pretty much.
I'm not sure why we would put staff through the trouble of preparing packages for us, or us going through it. It's not going to make any difference.
You know, I hear what you're saying, and I don't necessarily disagree with you. But I think that there should not be a differentiation for private projects and city projects. I think they should be all lumped, all together, just SDOs, regardless of who the applicant is.
You raise a good question, because that was one of my questions to Lonnie that I want to clarify. If we can have two different processes, one for the city and another for a private project.
And what was Lonnie's?
No, I haven't asked him yet. So, but that's something that while we were proposing that, I thought, well, that's a Lonnie's question,
I can see Paul's point.
right?
Oh, go ahead, Jenna.
I believe that this, we already have a different process for city projects. So I believe that that's, yeah. It could be just a different one, but we already have a different process.
Let me ask about a project. If the city's going to build a new police building for the police department, and council is negotiating with the architects, they're negotiating with the construction folks, all of those people, they're negotiating those contracts with them and how the drawings are going to look and how the building's going to be used and everything. All of that's already been done by the time this comes to us, right?
Yes.
I mean, if we're talking on the city projects, council has already negotiated what they want the building to look like. Right. Where I'm headed with this, though, is council has already done some of those negotiations that this board hasn't been involved in at all. And then if it comes to us because there's some deviation involved, then we're not, I mean, so much of it's already happened that we weren't involved in the council.
It would still have to meet the land development code standards, but you're right, they will have already negotiated with the consultants on the cost and things of that nature. When it comes to us, we review it per the requirements of the land development code. If something's missing or the consultant didn't add enough landscaping, we tell them and they have to add landscaping. So it still has to meet the minimum code requirements.
So what's the board's pleasure on these city projects?
My thing is leave it like it is.
What do you mean by the way it is, taking them out completely?
No,
Well,
there's no staff recommendation on this one, it's basically leaving.
there
it
is,
as a
they're
process.
eliminating them. They're eliminating all these, and they're just gonna
Yes.
have
Yeah, I just leave
staff
it like
and
it is.
city council.
Okay, I guess where I understand, what I'm saying is I'm saying leave it the way they are now, not necessarily eliminate this one line above it.
So you're saying not go with staff's recommendation?
Yes.
Yeah, that was my, leave it the way it is currently.
Maybe I should have been clear on that, so.
Me too, because I'm saying leave it the way it is currently.
Okay. Is that the consensus then for leave it as it currently is?
The major difference is just the DRC regulations.
And approves between 11 and 20, and then city council approves above that. And actually, in this case, there is no difference between 21, 30, and 30. Does the city have a development agreement with the city? No, so we don't have that distinction.
So, I mean,
We only have two.
going off of what you said, Madam Chair, seems like what the staff is recommending there is fine for, you know, judging by what you just explained. Just eliminate those different distinctions and let the land use administrator recommend it and the city approve it.
Rather than leaving it as it currently is?
Yes, just because it'll go to the land use administrator and they will make sure it meets the minimum requirements of our code, and then the city council will approve it.
I think I'd be more comfortable leaving it the way it is so that DRC has some reviews on it.
Okay.
You can also propose instead of DRC, PZA reviews, if
I think on these, I prefer DRC.
okay.
And recommend them. So just leave it as it in the black. Yes. Okay. That's fine.
Okay, the next one is site development order, new downtown zoning districts. PZA has recommended that the land use administrator be recommending, DRC be recommending, and PZA be approving. Right now, it's land use administrator is approving.
I had a problem with, that was me. I had a problem with it. On the, it says any % deviation. I mean, you're basically putting the whole project in the land use administrator's hands, and that's a huge project.
Deborah, can you tell us a little bit about what's been happening in the new downtown that has come to you guys already?
We've had the Levito on the Park apartments that the land use administrator, we had, how many deviations were with that one?
We
There were
have-
a lot of deviations with that one. There was a deviation for the signs, there were their sign, do you remember the square footage that they wanted with their sign?
We have they are
There were numerous deviations with that apartment complex. Then we also have the townhome development that's going in behind the apartments. It'll be access will be from 434. You can see it, the parcel is from 434. You can see that. I know we've had discussions on some other, like office projects that are going to come forward. We haven't received any applications, but any project in that downtown, the new downtown area, the city manager, the land use, who is land use administrator, can sign off on the site development order. And Jeno may want to add some more to that.
Yeah, actually, we have the Ovido Place Apartments, the name, right?
Yes.
Park Place Apartments.
Place.
Park Place Apartments, the townhomes, and we also have Panera Bread.
Yes.
Most of the deviations were related to the architectural standards. And the main reason for that was because the architectural standards in the new downtown were done for mixed-use buildings. So they have very specific standards that would say how many window frontage that you have to have. When you do a residential building only, you cannot meet these standards. So that's the main, for the apartments, that was one of the main reasons for the deviations. For the Panera Bread project, because it's a one project standing alone, so it's not the use, but there are some other, the architectural standards don't apply for that. So we had to approve the land use administrators approved the deviations.
Is the Panera Bread actually in the new downtown zoning district?
Yes,
For some reason, I thought it wasn't. I thought it was.
it is.
Okay.
Senator, from a historic standpoint, why was it that council set it up so that anything in the new downtown was done by staff and it didn't come to this board or council?
It was done as part of the consultants who did our land development code. If the building in that downtown area, because they were here to redo our master plan for the downtown, so it was Waitrose, and as part of their negotiations with some of the developers, it was, if you build the building the way the code says, and, well, actually, that's not even the case, because they do allow deviations. It was to spur the development.
To make it easier?
To make it easier. And I believe people are aware that the land use administrator can sign off on it. So it's not, I guess so let me see how to say it.
They made it easier.
They did. There you go.
It's for expedition.
Yeah, but they made it easy on a huge project, and to me, that just seems wrong.
We have to put our faith in Brian Cobb.
And it's up to the board. If the board wishes to be a reviewer, then you all can be a reviewer. You just make sure you say that is your consensus to do that.
When they've come before, or come to you guys with all this information, what can you use to deny them? Where a lot of times,
Our technical expertise, we can say that, but it's not we are not approving the deviations. So we can say that we disagree or not.
Yeah, we can voice our opinion
Yeah.
on whether or not we disagree, but I don't believe anything that we've disagreed on has ever been.
No, and also I just wanted to point that the specific case of it on the park is that the Article 6 that we have in the Land Development Code does not reflect what is the situation now of what is being proposed by Ovid on the Park. It was planned for a different project, and it was kind of customized for that, and that's why we had to change. We proposed to change the sign code because it does not reflect what is being proposed. So not all its flexibility is bad, right? I mean, for some, the mixed use didn't happen as we wanted, or we had forecasted that it would happen, And the city had to make adjustments to allow, the development that is coming. So that was one of the reasons why. But why the flexibility was introduced in the plan,
It was from
yeah,
H-Round.
I don't know, but,
Yeah. But, like Ms. Pearl said, there is a plan, and not all flexibility is bad, but you all will not know what has changed, because you all won't see it. So if you all want to see it, then you would either want to be the approving authority or the recommending body.
The intent was to make the process easier for this new downtown to be developed. But it was the new development at the time that was proposed, which is different than it is now. So in this case, I don't think that logic applied anymore, so I tend to agree that, maybe we need to put in some additional constraints in this case, because again, it was a nice master plan before and everything seemed to work, but now if what you're saying is true, you've seen quite a few deviation requests already at this point, and because it is a one-stop place to go to, everybody knows about it, it's probably making the process easier for one side in a sense. So I wouldn't have a problem increasing
the review.
increasing the load a little bit, so.
I mean, this is such a huge project, we got to get it right. And to just, have them come into the land use administrator every day saying, oh, we need to do this, we need to do that, and it's just getting signed off on, it's just, to me, it's just not going to work.
I have a problem.
I'm sorry?
I have a problem.
So then do we have, I guess we need, if we're going to change what is currently there, then I would think that we would want to put some limits in there, rather than saying any deviation needs to be DRC or PCA. If we go back to private project, some of the numbers that we'll see in the private project.
Or you can say anything up to 20%, the land use administrator can approve, everything else you all approve.
I was just gonna say, I don't do anything, goes back to what we originally said on the previous anything, use that as our guideline, anything over 20% comes to us.
Well, 10, 20, and above 20, is that right?
They don't need to break it, just anything above 20,
We
they
can
can see it.
just do that. I would feel
So
comfortable.
leave it the way it is for anything less than 20,
Right.
and then anything over 20
No DRC, it just comes to us.
just comes to PZA.
Yep.
Yes. As a approving body.
As the approving body.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, eminent
Madam Chairperson, can you repeat what you are proposing?
Yes, on for the site development order for the new downtown,
Mm-hmm.
any, for deviations less than 20% would be approved by the land use administrator. Any deviations greater than 20%, the land use would be recommending and PCA would be approving.
So city council would not be part of it, okay.
Right.
They're not right now.
Yeah, that's a valid flyer either, but that's our recommendation.
Okay.
Okay, then eminent domain, non-conforming. There's a couple of A's in there for it to go from the land use administrator.
Well, the way it is now, the land use administrator can approve or can refer to DRC. So that's why there is a or.
Okay,
A.
and there's a couple of ones in here who say council ought to do those.
That was Mr. Paul.
I think it was probably me. It's eminent domain, just go, huh? And just go straight to city council. take everybody else out of the loop and they can make the decision or not. I don't know.
Well, can staff help us out here with defining
I think
this?
with eminent domain non-conforming, we don't have much room, right? Because it's a situation that comes from the result of the eminent domain. So we accept it. That's basically what it is. Yes. Basically, we don't have much room to negotiate or to.
So we have a consensus to leave that one the way it is currently.
That's fine.
Okay, and we don't have any changes until we get down to building permit, other DP.
Yeah.
Okay, so greater than 20% land use would be recommending and PCA would be approving. So want to bring up the staff on that one? Okay. Okay, then building permit, city project.
I mean, just to be consistent with what we did on the SDOs, just go ahead and keep it the way it was. And
Is staff recommending for all of those city projects, with any deviation, recommendation from you to city council?
Yeah, we would replace that with any deviation above, any deviation would go to city council, yeah.
Okay.
Not above, yeah.
Okay, so for private projects, we agreed with staff that it would be the land use administrator, PCA approving any deviation over 20%. For city projects, staff is recommending any deviation, land use is recommending, and council's approving. For city projects. Is the consensus to agree with staff on that one? I don't see any hands.
I mean, that one, I mean, if, for the site development orders for the city projects, I mean, that, staff's recommendation there is consistent with the recommendation on the site development orders. On site development orders, we decided to keep the original process in place. So I would think, to be consistent, we would want to keep the original process in place for the city project as well.
Okay, so is the consensus then to leave building permits, city projects, the way it currently is?
Yes.
All that doesn't have the land use administrator involved. Except for deviation. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're still out of the loop on all of them, but that's how we are on the site development orders as well, so.
Well, if we don't take staff's recommendation on that one, then there is no recommending body.
Right. It's either getting approved by the land use administrator, DRC, or the city council.
No, actually, land use administrator, we didn't fill that out because before we didn't have all in the original that I sent you, there was one table that we had, in the files as the current process, and it was not put DR to every land use administrator, but staff always recommends something. So staff is always there is always an R for a land use administrator.
Okay.
Okay, so then the consensus is to leave it at that one where it is? Okay. The way it currently is?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and then the last one is building permit,
With DRC recommendation?
Recommendation?
No.
Oh, no, DRC.
We don't.
Get our Rs and As and approve in the right order.
Yeah, I will have to review the.
Yeah, good luck with that one.
Should we continue?
Oh, before you do, let's take about a 10-minute break.
Okay. The time, yeah. No. Okay.
Okay, we'll call it back to order.
So the second subject we need directions from you is about accessory dwelling units. And accessory dwelling units are also called granny flats, garage apartments, ancillary units, and carriage houses. And the definition that we are using here is a dwelling unit attached to or included within a principal dwelling unit or located on the same lot having an independent means of access. Such units may include a full kitchen, and that is basically what differentiates accessory dwelling unit from a guest house, for instance, the fact that you have a kitchen. So there are many benefits of having accessory dwelling units, and you can achieve different policies with that, and that's something we have to discuss. There is a demographic change going on. Everybody knows that. So we have the life expectancy is increasing. This is a table showing the demographic change in Oviedo. So in 2000 right? We had 2000 census. We had 5.76% of people, of residents above 65 years old, and now we have in 2010 we had 7.4. So this is increasing. And one of the things that also in the visual preference survey that we distributed the draft report for you today, that will show, and there are some comments about it, that people want to age in their houses. And accessory dwelling units is one of the ways that you can achieve that, because either you would move to the accessory unit and rent your own house so that you didn't need to, take care of the lawn, that kind of thing, or you could rent out, or have a family member, or if you have a family and invite your in-laws or your, parents to come with you. So this is something that has been used, and that's a change that we see in other cities too. So other cities are also discussing ADUs. It allows for greater neighborhood stability because you can stay in your house, and it also improves, it helps with sprawl because increasing density, increase the amount of affordable housing options depending on how you define your standards, and can help first-time buyers qualify for mortgage. So that's another consideration. For us, it's a comprehensive plan approved policy. So we have this requirement to regulate, the accessory dwelling units. We have it in the complaint. We don't have regulations in the Land Development Code. Our policy says that the city shall provide for granny flats, mother-in-law suites, accessory apartments, or other forms of ancillary units as permitted uses in residential and mixed-use areas without the need for special exception use orders. So we have just two criteria already there. It's a permitted use. You don't need to require a special exception use order, and it is allowed in residential and mixed-use zoning. So this is already established by the comp plan. We can add other standards, but this is already in our comp plan unless we change it. We could, the way it is, the comp plan is allowing for all residential and mixed-use areas. So
We cannot regulate the CC&Rs of any subdivision. It is up to that subdivision to do that. We can, if someone were to come to us for building permit, we wouldn't deny it. We wouldn't have any grounds to deny it on. It would be between the HOA and the homeowner. Right. I can hardly hear you.
It could be an it could be an HOA reg that you can't have an ADU, and that's between the HOA and the homeowner.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
yeah, some cities put in their own regulation that, but I think in our case, the complaint would allow, right, for the. So these are considerations that we listed here, and things that we can think about. We would consider the maximum to be 1 per lot. The lot has to be compliant, so we wouldn't allow, an ADU in a lot that is non-compliant. Cannot be sold separately or exist independent from the main unit. So it is an additional use, and it's attached to the main use. So I cannot build the accessory dwelling unit and not build the house, right? It will become after and in connection with the house. Depending on the restrictions that we would request, we would also put a requirement that the owner would have to file in the deed declaration of restrictions, so that it cannot be sold separately, that kind of thing. It cannot be subdivided, in another unit, a lot. It can be detached or detached, and we can make the call. We also want to clarify that mobile homes are not considered accessory dwelling units. Some cities include the requirement that the owner must live on property in either, units. That's something that we can also discuss. The other thing that for us it would be important is that the unit has to provide the same architectural character and treatment as the main house. And that would define our approval process. Usually we don't check architecture in residential development, but if we allow accessory dwelling units, we would have to check that. We are proposing to have one additional off-street parking, but then the parking would be, does not necessarily need to be in a garage, can be in the driveway, but you have to provide that additional parking. Also, we want to make sure that there is water and wastewater capacity and drainage, on site. Another issue is the address. We would require the same address and same electricity and water meter. So and these are, issues to be discussed, but we want to provide the unit, but we don't want it to be, used as in an easy way to be rented out. So we have to have that and not rented out, let me rephrase that. We don't want it to be dissociated from the main house, so that it has already a different address. It is one address, we'll have 2 units. That's what we wanted to make sure that it is conveyed. It is already a permitted use in residential and mixed-use areas. We can discuss who will be the user. Some cities limit to relative from the the owner of the house. Today, this is an interesting discussion because households today are defined in different ways, and at a certain point, the city will have to face that. How are we going to approach that? Also, how are we going to enforce that? Is another issue, and it has to be related with what policy we want to address. If you want to address the family, the in-laws or your own parents, or that's one way to tackle limiting to be a relative. You want to allow someone to have additional income, then you would allow the renter, non-relative. So that's a subject for discussion. It's a policy issue. We would only allow residential use in the unit or a home office. So the use is still residential. And one way also to regulate accessory units is providing a minimum and a maximum square footage. And usually it's related with the main floor of the primary house. And it ranges in that range there, 300 square feet and 800 square feet in all the cities that we researched that already have ADUs. It can be attached or detached, already said that, and we have to decide the impact fees if we're going to apply as multifamily or as duplex. That's another thing that we have to come to a conclusion. And again, depending on how much you want to incentivize or not accessory units. The standards, the setbacks, open space, and height can be the same as a principal house, and most cities do that. Some would make even more restrictive. The approving authority, some cities take it straight to city council. I mean, it's not a special exception use, but the conditions and the architecture and all that has to be approved by city council. Some cities also say no deviations allowed. I mean, we allow ADUs, but this is already an additional use, so it has to be compliant. And for units above garages, there was in the literature and in the research that we did this concern with privacy of having, an additional unit, usually in the over the garages, looking on your front yard, or So there was this issue with privacy because there will be a independent access, and so there will be more, movement in that area. That it should be the windows and the door to giving access should be turned to inside the lot and not to the side of the property.
Teresa, I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
On the first page of this, where it says the same address and same electrical and water meter, what's the purpose of this?
Same address is to, I'm saying that it is to make sure that it is one unit, that this is an accessory unit to the main house. So we are not, subdividing the lot, or, or even the house. You cannot sell that unit, to someone else. It is additional to the main.
Okay, let me ask, if you have a garage unit, and whether it's your kids or in-laws or some distant relative, whatever, or somebody else who's renting it, they may have a problem with the post office that they're not allowed to have an address, whether it's 310A and 310B, at least be able to do it that way. Because otherwise, when they put in a forwarding address, post office will either forward all of the mail at 310 or they won't forward any of it. They won't differentiate a lot of times unless there's some distinction with the address.
Again, this is depending on the policy. If you want to allow people to have additional income or have, students, because that's another big issue with the accessory dwelling units will be the proximity with UCF. So that's something. Some people don't see a problem in that. I personally think that we should tackle the problem that those kids cause more than trying to, define a household to eliminate, because you're eliminating the kids, not necessarily bad kids, but you're also eliminating all the rental possibilities if you not allow non-relatives. So depending on the policy, you could allow different addresses or AB. We have to check that with how we could still have one address but differentiated units, subunits in that address. And the electricity is also, if you want to have a rental, then probably would request an additional.
Now,
Right.
Are these allowable under Seminole County? And can we supersede Seminole County on these? Because
Winter Springs has just approved accessory dwelling units.
okay, because I just had a friend that's in unincorporated Seminole County, and they had to go through a lot more than this is what they would have wanted to put, but they weren't allowed to.
Winter Springs I think over there it's a special exception use order, I think, but I can check. We read their case.
You asked if we can supersede what Seminole County requires? Is that what?
Because it was my understanding that you weren't allowed to have a full kitchen in a.
That
No.
is our regulations will more than likely be different from Seminole County. It'll be different from other municipalities, and we may have some similarities, but our comprehensive plan, which was amended back in 2010, requires that we address it in our land development code. So it's not, Seminole County regulation only governs, except for if it's like a charter amendment, it only governs Seminole County unincorporated area. And so what we're doing tonight is we're going to, and for the next year, less than a year, we'll be addressing regulations for Oviedo that's tailored just for Oviedo.
Okay, all right.
Does this, this comp plan amendment that would have to be done, obviously it has to address boarding homes, because that's one thing we've always had, where
No more than three.
no unrelated, more than 3 people, because if, I moved my wife out to the, back room and rent the house to, as we were saying, UCF, or even a family of 5 at that point, there's a line there that, we'd have to adjust to, correct?
And Teresa can better answer, because we were just talking about that earlier this week. It's not a comprehensive plan amendment. That's already done. It's going to be the land development code now.
Okay.
And
Sorry, I misspoke.
yes, we will have to address the definition of family. We will, depending on the direction that this board and city council wishes to go. If they want to have it rented out to people who are not related, we will have to address that definition of family.
That's a big, when I was on code enforcement, that was the hardest thing for us to enforce on code enforcement was a non-relative. And without asking people for birth certificates, it was almost impossible to enforce. So unless a student, or it was usually students, came and said, yes, we are totally unrelated, all 5 of us live in a place, we're renting it, we're good renters, we still had to enforce it, but it really took them admitting it. All they had to do was say, nope, we're related, and we never went further than that, because at that point, it gets really challenging. I was going to clarify, too, for your aging studies, it's not actually accurate. I appreciate us looking at people as they want to age in place, and they usually use the granny suites, living with a family member, living with a daughter or son, but people who want to age in their homes remodel their homes more than living out in the backyard in a shed and having somebody else live in their main house that they raise their children in. That when you see people want to age in place, they want to age in their own home. So I appreciate these being for living with their children and moving with their. I don't see this being grandma's not going to move out in the back of her own house.
Mhm.
So that's really not how people age in Cleveland. Are we trying to decide as a board, or are we asked to look at how we want these used, if it's going to be a rental
Yeah.
income, or if it's going to be an extension of your home?
Yeah, that's what we need today, is one,
These, to me, I think that they should remain as a family member. But I'm just thinking about overall in the city, when you look at the neighborhoods and the amount of houses, or amount of homes in the city that have HOAs, that these wouldn't be allowed in anyways. There's not a lot of homes that these would even apply to.
Well, I think so many of the existing properties, the houses were built to cover every square inch of dirt that they possibly could. There's not room to build.
Yeah. I mean, you can go above,
Garage?
like my neighborhood, Waverly Woods. I mean, you can go above the garage, but even then, to find another door and a stairwell to put it through it would be ridiculous. And then on top of that, there's no parking.
And then you're looking at the elderly, you're going upstairs, so now you're looking at putting in a lift or an elevator if you're trying to address that issue of
Right.
aging in place, so you don't go above anything
So,
for an extension home.
I mean, but I still think it should remain as a relative. I don't think, I don't personally feel like we need to be building these and renting them out, but because of the issue that we have with college students, you'll have a lot of college students coming in here and renting these accessory dwellings, and I know you were talking about dealing with the problems and not necessarily the problems that they bring with them, but there are parking issues and other things. At least if you have family members, you're a little bit more. You have a little bit more vested. A little bit more vested in the house and the neighborhood as well.
just one thing that I think it's important to say, that we have been having some interest, right, in accessory dwelling units. The zoning, both Melissa and Karan tell us that people come because they've heard that a city allows. So there is interest. I don't know exactly what is it targeting for, but there is interest in approving and applying for accessory dwelling units.
But you don't know whether they're applying to rent them or to
No, there was something that they brought that, because when we started this land development code review, that they brought that are we going to regulate, accessory dwelling units? People come here and ask for it. If we have, and many cities are doing that. I think, especially if a lot of cities do that to increase affordability options for the population. That's one route to go, especially larger cities. But for us, the idea of allowing more density is something that is aligned with what we are trying to promote, right? A better use of the space that it's already there. So you're not building a new house, but you're increasing density in existing neighborhoods. And some neighborhoods can absorb that. Some neighborhoods will not be able to absorb that. If you have all those requirements, it won't be able to. We won't have every house in Oviedo applying for that. But in some situations, that would be a possibility.
And Kathy brought up the mail issue, because maybe there's some regs that I'm not aware of, but I'm thinking if you have a private person that you are renting to, if we went away from that family, there's going to be privacy issues of two people using the same mailbox. I can't go in my neighbor's mailbox, they can't come in mine. So you don't even have a privacy for your own mail that's coming in if you do have somebody that's renting. I mean, I guess I can get my son's if he's renting from me, but yeah, I mean, you're getting into those kind of privacy things of not having things separated if you don't allow for separation.
I I don't have this big an issue with it, everybody having to be related. I've seen these types of units more in older neighborhoods.
Winter Park.
Winter Park, Gulf Port is one, where Stetson Law School is, it's down between St. Pete and St. Pete Beach. It's a, I don't know, 2 or 3 square mile city, it's very small, but it was built out like in the 50s, so lots of those homes that have garages haven't had units added to them and that sort of thing. And it has provided a lot more affordable housing and a lot more housing in an area that was already built out. I don't see in the types of neighborhoods that we have in most of Avita that these would even be allowed, because of HOAs or because of the size of the lots or whatever. I don't see this being a big issue.
Like on Highland, over there by Jackson, or by Lawton, that area like off of Graham, I don't know that there's an HOA out there. Do you know
The
what I'm
big
talking about?
older.
The big
Yeah.
older
Type
houses, as you come down on 434 off to the right-hand side, I can see there are a lot that are on private lots, I believe, back there without any kind of homeowners. That might be the only one that I can think of that are older homes on big lots.
Off of Jessup, I think there's
Yeah,
some houses
exactly.
off of Jessup and off of,
And by the way, I provided an article for you, and you'll see, a lot of those issues, and you'll see also, I think 2 or 3 cities, how they applied it, and what was the policy, and even the aging in place, they probably talk about that. That's because we took that from also literature. So I won't dispute that, if that doesn't
I'm a
happen,
CAPS
it may,
Yeah, I'm a CAPS therapist, so I'm a
So,
certified
yeah.
aging in place therapist, so that's what we do, is we go into homes and we help remodel with certified builders and we
Yeah.
try to help them remodel.
they use it as one, tool to,
So that's current practice.
yeah.
Is it possible for us to continue this part until we have a chance to read the article?
Sure. And actually, I would propose, because we are getting a little bit, late, and the visual preference survey is a very interesting subject, because I think that, especially the comments, I think it's interesting to go through them, and I provided them this is still a draft, but it gives all the information. The only thing that is still missing is the conclusion, but you have that in the PowerPoint. But I provide them I classify them, and then in the end, I give you the unedited, comments, so that you can see all the comments that were provided. And we have 540 people responding our survey, and 181 or 2 provided comments. And I ended up breaking some of them just to classify them. But they are very interesting. So if you want to have either another session, if you want to meet in a one-on-one meeting
If it's possible,
fashion, that would be good.
Can continue the discussion on the ADUs,
Okay.
and also, if you want to continue the presentation on
Visual preference survey.
preference.
That's great.
Our next meeting is that October 8th, will that work for you?
October 8th, is that the next one? Okay. The next PCA.
October 8th is our next regular.
Perfect, yeah. We can do that.
Do we have a consensus of
I agree. Yes.
the board?
I am 19, I'm leaving.
Will that,
Yes, that
With your
works for
time
us,
schedule?
yes.
okay, if we can do that, then we'll continue
Okay.
that to the next meeting, and then that will give all of us time to read through this and have a
And-
better idea of what we're suggesting.
Yeah, and meanwhile, if you have any questions, and if you want any additional information, just contact us. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.